I just finished a great conversation with Philip Shepard, my guest on this episode of The Sacred Everywhere. I've been following Philip's work for a few years now, mostly through his book Radical Wholeness, The Embodied Present and the Ordinary Grace of Being, and another book of his called New Self, New World. And Philip teaches and writes about uh, this idea of the embodied presence and tapping into our whole body's intelligence and the intelligence of the world and being a participant in that body world. And we just had such a great conversation because so much of what he talks about is so aligned with the things that I talk about, coming at them from a different angle. So where I'm coming at things maybe from, using Alfred North Whitehead and process philosophy and theology and Jungian psychology and spirituality and mysticism, Philip is teaching and talking about perception and the body's intelligence and the our way of being in the world that I think is so wonderful and alive and life-giving. And so I'm so happy to be able to share this conversation with you today. We get into a lot of great topics. We get a little bit talking about our comparisons with our work and Whitehead's thinking and his thinking, but most importantly, we talk about wholeness and we talk about how to surrender to that experience of wholeness of in the present moment and the body's intelligence and what that opens up for us in terms of how we live in this world and whether or not we feel alone or we feel like we are part of a whole entire community of wholeness. And so I welcome you to this conversation. You'll hear part one, and then the full episode is available on Substack. And anyway, I'm just so excited for you to hear this conversation. So welcome to The Sacred Everywhere. Welcome to The Sacred Everywhere. I'm Dr. Sheri Kling, and in this space we explore how the sacred shows up in real life, in our questions, our struggles, our longing, and our hope. Can we find the sacred in every place and everyone? Let's see. All right. Well, welcome, Philip Shepard, to The Sacred Everywhere. So glad to be in conversation with you. Welcome.
Oh, it's so good to be here. Thanks, Sherry. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I first encountered your work through a friend of mine. She mentioned your name, and then I went and looked you up online and initially read an interview that you, I think, have posted on your website. And I was so moved by that interview. It just hit me on so many levels of resonance. And so then I, got more interested in your work and read your book Radical Wholeness, which I'm going to hold up right there. And then you have another book, New Self, New World, that I'm working on. But why don't you start by just telling us a little bit about kind of what you see as your core work and your core, mission in the world, if you might say it that way.
Yeah, I mean, the way I might set that up is that we are the cleverest culture that has ever existed, hands down, and we've forgotten how to live intelligently. So there is some distinction between cleverness and intelligence that we fail to make because we think we're supremely intelligent. Um, and, it's also this confusion that we have between mind and brain where people talk about their mind and they're pointing to their heads. And I'm thinking, no, mind suffuses every cell of the body. So in the long arc of our kind of cultural evolution, we moved from a body-centered existence that was in a culture gathered around the mother and worshiped the goddess, and had this intimate relationship with the earth. And we transitioned out of that into a culture that lives in the head, has lost that relationship with the earth. And, we aspire to the sky, and that's heaven, and that's where the gods live, and they're male, or he is male. Earth, that's where hell is.
Right.
This is, whoa, really, really extraordinary. So intelligence, is holistic. It is relational.
Hmm.
Um, it doesn't lend itself to explanation very well. For me, it is a field phenomenon in which
Mm.
the body participates. It's essentially embodied. And cleverness is what happens when you live in the head and dissociate from the body. And it is blind to wholeness. Radical wholeness is largely about how, as a culture, we systematically desensitize ourselves to wholeness. And the head sees the parts and their relationships, and you can express cleverness in language. It's a closed system rather than a field. It builds its models of the world and focuses primarily on its ideas about the world rather than coming into relationship with the world itself. And, for our evolutionary history, we depended on an embodied intelligence that, in my language, attunes to the world. And it's atrophied because we don't need to attune to the world. Our
Mm.
cleverness has discovered agriculture and machinery to do our work for us, etc., etc. And in that process of atrophy, we've forgotten that intelligence exists to the extent that what indigenous cultures take for granted, which is that they can feel the presence of water in the world. They can feel plants offering their medicines. They can feel animals moving through the world. There's an elder from the Unangan nation, which is on those islands of Alaska that trail off towards Russia, Ilarion Merkuliev, who talks about being with the hunters as a child and sitting on these basalt rocks. And they were hunting the sea lion, and they had a sacred relationship with the sea lion, akin to what the Plains Indians had with the buffalo.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd sit there for hours in quiet, in silence, not daydreaming, attuning. And then, one of them would say, sea lion coming. And all the heads would turn and look in the same direction. The sea lion might be 5 or 10 miles offshore, but
Mm.
they can feel its presence.
Wow.
And and that intelligence, embodied intelligence is more than 3 billion years older than our head-based intelligence.
Right.
And yet the head-based intelligence has taken over and really impoverished not just our lives, but our relationship with the life of this earth. And so
Yeah.
my work is about recovering that embodied intelligence. And in the process of that, one thing we as a culture don't realize is there is a geography to the body's intelligence.
Mm.
That the head is this realm of abstractions. The pelvic bowl is what I feel is the realm of my being, where that holistic intelligence is centered. And the heart is the portal that opens to that, and the legs are these conduits that resonate to and commune with the earth. And we've so contracted into the head that we've lost our relationship, not just with the body, but with the world around us.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was when I was living in California and getting my doctorate at Claremont, I was also working at a health sciences university with 9 graduate health science colleges, and I used to joke that it was like they were all like brains on sticks, walk, walking around, and so often so in this abstract world and out of touch with their own bodies, and yet teaching about health and medicine, you know? I
Yeah.
mean, I loved them all. They were great people, but and
Yeah.
doing really
Yeah.
smart things, and great research. And I mean, not to a person, but there was just a lot of people that seemed like brains on sticks to me.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, it is our culture. It's what the public school system teaches us. I mean, you look at, to take a young child and say, now you sit in this desk and don't move. And
Yeah,
if you move, you're going to be punished. And you
right.
fill your head, with these ideas that as the head of the class, I'm teaching you, and you'll be rewarded. You come out of that system believing that if you can shut down the sensitivity to what's happening in the body, all that noise below the neck, and just
Hmm.
concentrate with the head, you will succeed.
Yeah. Right.
And if the primary characteristic of trauma is a dissociation with the body,
Right.
our school systems, our culture itself is traumatizing us. We're all
E-
traumatized.
Exactly. Exactly. If we're not traumatized at home, we're traumatized by the world and in the world.
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, by what it models for us.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Um, one of the things that you and I share, and you've, touched on it here, but is this impatience or, you know, questioning, critique of the Western worldview, of the main story, the dominant narrative that we live within. And, process thinkers, so I come out of the field of I'm a theologian and, studied process philosophy and theology. Whitehead, John Cobb, David Ray Griffin, Marjorie Suhaki, people like that, and also Carl Jung. So I'm very interested in that
Mm.
intersection of spirituality and psychology, and the movement toward uh, individuation and wholeness and all of that. And so there's a part in the book Radical Wholeness where you're talking about this story, the Western worldview, and you say the story asserts that humans stand as independent of nature as our skyscrapers do, that the head should be in charge of the body, just as a CEO is in charge of a corporation, that we can own trees, land, and animals, that self-mastery is the means to success, that what we feel as the self lies within the boundary of the skin, and that the pursuit of happiness is the primary goal of our lives, and that money buys security. And so I want to ask you to tell us a little bit about what led you to question that story to begin with.
Oh boy. I used to answer this by saying I was in a rage as a teenager, which is true.
Mm,
I could feel my being compromised by the mores and customs and demands and value systems of my culture. So beneath the rage is a love of life.
mm,
And the love of life was being hammered and diminished
mm,
by these constraints. And so I understood, there's this great story about the Irish hero Cuchulainn, who was deeply betrayed by the king. And to vent his rage, he took his sword and went out and started battling the waves as they came in. And of course, the waves won.
yeah.
Um, and I realized I I fought. I was not a pleasant teenager. Um, because somebody would say to me, "How are you?" And I would answer, "Well, do you mean that in an ontological sense? Do you mean how is it that I am? I just want to understand what you're asking." I
Yeah.
was impossible. But I knew that if I stayed in that ocean of my culture, I would succumb. And
Mm,
so I went to England and bought a bike and headed off for Japan and
mm.
was out of the crucible of my culture for 2 years
Wow.
and came back able to question because suddenly what was so deeply familiar was at the same time rendered as arbitrary.
Wow. Yeah, that reminds me too, we're going to talk a little bit more in a bit about Whitehead and some of his views that I think align really well with yours. But one of the phrases that people often use of his, and I'm not sure we're always using it in the way that he always used it, but he talked about the fallacy of misplaced concreteness. The
Beautiful.
sense that we just live in this abstraction and think
Yeah.
that it's real and concrete, and it's not. We
Yeah.
have these models and these ideas, and okay, so let's acknowledge there's been a lot of advance that's come out of this Western worldview since the Enlightenment.
Medicine, science,
Yeah,
music, art, absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Amazing advances have come. And at the same time, there have been these negative consequences where we are that have led us to now look at us in this world, in this culture where this, incredible levels of mental illness and people feeling like they're just under constant pressure to perform and produce and just being crushed by a system that is not interested in our depths and our hearts and our souls and our aliveness. I mean, I also love that quote from The Power of Myth where Joseph Campbell says to Bill Moyers, people are not looking for the meaning of life. They're looking for the experience of the rapture of being alive.
Yeah. Yeah. So yes, it's the system, but I think what is crushing us is a fantasy that our culture is deeply mired in. So speaking of Joseph Campbell, um, he delineated the tyrant of mythology and described him as the man of self-achieved independence.
Mm,
Now that phrase, boy, that's the American dream, isn't it? I mean,
yeah.
self-achieved independence. You make your billion and you have your mansion, your private island, and you're independent. And I mean, independence in that view means a total lack of responsibility to anyone but yourself.
Hmm.
And you look at the word responsibility, the ability to respond. You
Yeah.
are contracting into a private world that leaves you. I mean, ultimately, Howard Hughes is the terminus of that process. Alone in a room with just three people he's willing to meet, has to use a new Kleenex, to touch anything because he's a germaphobe and he's gone
Right.
mad. And
Right.
that,
Right.
that process of coming into independence can only be achieved through desensitivity. We are utterly a part of and shaped by and participant in the whole. There
Mm-hmm.
is independence. If I were the emperor of the world, I'd be tempted to outlaw the word until someone could point to an actual example of independence
Right.
anywhere in the cosmos. I
Right.
don't
There is
care.
none.
Doesn't
Yeah.
exist. There's no such thing. And so what we've done is we've sort of focused on this fantasy, and it's a fantasy for me that arises from the way we inhabit the body.
Mm.
So if you live in your head, you have shut down or desensitized yourself to your embodied experience. Your body is the bridge to the world. It's through the body that you feel the present, that you are nourished by it and informed by it. So now, you've retreated into the head, and to me the strength of living in the head, of that intelligence, is that it provides perspective.
Mm.
You know, perspective requires distance. You don't
Right.
have perspective in the middle of something. You step back and you gain perspective. So we go into the head and we step back and we gain perspective, which is valuable, but that perspective will concretize as a static idea that will then stand between you and the thing it purports to represent and block it from view.
Yeah.
So, we prize head-based knowledge, and my head-based knowledge, I mean, I can look anywhere, I can tell you what everything is. The corollary of that is, well, then why would I need to feel any of it?
Uh-huh.
I know what it is, right? And so we live in this static model that we've built of what the world is, these concepts, these ideas, and we are disconnected from wholeness, disconnected from our lives, disconnected from everything in a way that cannot possibly provide peace of heart,
Mm.
cannot provide genuine fulfillment in life. We're
Yeah.
we're 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 chasing fantasies, and
Right.
that, I mean, our system is so mired in that head-based, I call it headism. We've exalted the head, and to the extent that two heads are better than one, and we live in a economic system we call capitalism, which comes from a Latin word that means head, and chief comes from a word that means head, and you've got to have a good head on your shoulders, and it goes on to our love of the car that is a head on wheels and it's got two headlights because we have two eyes, and the metaphor of riding insulated from the world in this metal canister is so close to the way we ride through the world in our heads, and it has
Mm.
depleted our responsibility, our ability to respond to the world.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, one of the I participated in a webinar or listened to your participation in one of the embodiment summits or something like that a couple of years ago. And I'll never forget when you said that embodiment is not about feeling the body, which for years that's what I thought. You said it's feeling the world through the body.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
just that sense, and I think too here again of both Whitehead and Jung, who also talked a lot about this arbitrary cut we make between ourselves and the world, and the sense like Whitehead talks about the withness of the body, and he says the body lies in the field of nature, and Jung talks about there are times I feel as if I'm spread out across all of nature. And then even Teilhard de Chardin has a similar idea where he's talking about it in a sense that we think we are um, this little whole experiencing the world as parts, but we're actually a part we are the whole experienced in this part, you know?
yeah, yeah.
And so uh
So
I'm just
can I
yeah,
just one little thing, because what you're speaking of, that sort of putative boundary that holds me in here and the world is out there,
yeah,
again, to me is a consequence of living in the head. If you here's the paradox, that if you are seeking independence, you are seeking aloneness,
right.
separation, and we are trained to feel that we are alone in the world.
Mm,
Stand on your own 2 feet, be independent. You're alone.
yeah,
I mean, aloneness again is a fantasy. You are felt intimately by everything around you. There is
yeah,
companionship everywhere. But as soon as you accept I'm alone, then suddenly your experience is strictly private, and then your number one job in life becomes to organize it, to make it successful. So then you take the spotlight of your attention and you turn it off the world and turn it onto yourself. So you cast the world in darkness and you get busy organizing the self. And we organize our thoughts and our agendas and we organize our emotions, we organize our bodies. And it makes it, for me, it turns our primary relationship in all the world into a relationship between the divided parts of ourselves.
mm,
And it takes in our culture, such courage and humility and trust to, to move out of self-supervision, move out of the self-consciousness of that, and find the present, find the world more interesting than you find your own thoughts about it, to
mm,
attend in that
yeah,
way.
yeah. Wow, that's really interesting. So I talk a little bit about you write in this book, Radical Wholeness, about a culture in Africa and their different way of looking at the senses, and talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I've been so helped and supported by indigenous cultures. Partly they give me language for what I have felt but not found acknowledged anywhere else. So the Anglo-Ewe culture, there's this great woman, Elizabeth Geertz, who spent time with them because she'd heard they had a different sensorium, a different set of senses. We have five senses. What could be more obvious? How could there be anything else? And they don't even have a word for senses. They have a word, sesalilame, that translates literally as feel at flesh inside. And they have, she said, roughly nine senses. And it's very telling, given what we've been discussing. Balance is their primary sense.
Mm.
And you think, well, we talk about losing our sense of balance. We talk about it as a sense. Why don't we acknowledge balance as a sense?
Yeah.
And the way I understand that is every other sense follows the model of, a stimulus arrives from the outside world, crosses the boundary of the self that separates out from in, and lands on a receptor and is sent to the brain to be interpreted. Balance isn't that. Balance is a felt relationship.
Mm.
And we don't want to acknowledge as a culture in a deeply, deeply unconscious way that we are in this relationship. And so we exclude balance from our sensorium because we want the flattery of thinking we are independent of relationship.
Right.
Um, another really interesting part of feel it flesh inside, Cecil Alame, is they'll say, yeah, I mean you can listen with the ear, but it's not real hearing.
Mm.
Real hearing, you feel the sounds of the world through the body. Real seeing, you feel the sights of the world through the body. Um, and they consider language a sense.
Mm.
And you think, how could they get it so wrong? I mean, with language, you're delivering information, and a sense receives information. But I think again, we are deeply misguided. Our need for control wants us to believe that we are delivering information in a sort of ready-made form as we speak. And to me, the reality of it is that as I speak, I am feeling my way forward. I don't know what the last word of the sentence is going to be. I don't even know necessarily where the sentence is going to take me. So in the same way that I use the sense of touch to feel my way into a room, speech is a sense that enables me to feel my way forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it takes us out of the self-consciousness of speech where there is separation and I am delivering this to you into being present in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
I am attuning and sensitive and responsive.
And what would you say are what comes as a result of living more in the world in the way you describe, in this way of being more attuned to the present and attuned to the wholeness and allowing the body's intelligence to be alive in all aspects? What comes with that?
I rarely make decisions. Um, oh, should I, or pros and cons. I mean, we drive ourselves nuts, not wanting to make a mistake. Trying to weigh all the possible avenues and benefits and advantages. And when I drop into my body, there may be a challenge, or maybe a choice I need to make, and I can sit with it, and then it's like the penny drops, and I just know. And there is no doubt, there's no second guessing. I am guided forward. And that, the body, what it most deeply feels is the present. And what it most deeply knows is that it belongs. And this relationship with an embodied intelligence that can feel the world, what it is feeling in the world, is guidance. And it is always there. And if you've taken charge of organizing yourself, you have basically disbarred yourself from being present, at least as I understand it. My experience of being present is one in which I feel myself being organized by the present. I'm being touched by it. I'm being informed by it. I'm being guided by it. And to live in an embodied way is to be relieved of that top-down divided state that we live in, which is like a prison of self-consciousness, and we're always supervising ourselves, and it's like we're beating ourselves and flattering ourselves and making demands of ourselves and extolling ourselves, and inner commentary requires, like inner dialogue requires division.
Right. Right.
Without division, there's no dialogue. And
Right.
Ilarion Merkuliev, whom I mentioned earlier, the Yunangan elder, he says, he realized the hunters who could feel the sea lion 10 miles offshore, they could go for hours without one thought going through their heads. And
Wow.
Ilarion says, true intelligence is that state where there are no thoughts going through your head. And
Wow.
that's to me, that's embodied intelligence. That is that state of attuning. And there is such subtlety to the way the world whispers to us. And to be in your embodied intelligence, it's like you are situated in an ocean
Mm.
that informs you. And to be in the head, it's like you're in a swimming pool.
Right.
And it's just so, I mean, that's the difference for me.
It's like you're closing off the sources of flowing fresh water and ending up in a stagnant pool of your own thoughts. Whereas if you open up the gates, open up the openings, the sluice, whatever you want to call them, then you get that flow of the whole coming in and going out, and then you're participating in a flowing movement, and that's no longer stagnant. It's alive to the freshness of what is available in terms of all knowing.
And it is your reality.
Hmm.
That we are in that ocean. We are participant in all of that, and we are in wholeness. However you feel, you are in wholeness, and the only way to come out of wholeness is to desensitize to it. The only way to live in the head is to desensitize the body, and then you no longer, when you no longer feel that, all you can do is guide yourself. I mean, we need orientation. We need to know how to move forward. So we sit on our head and take charge and agonize in this swimming pool of stagnant water.
Right, right. There was a place in the book where so what's hard, more difficult, I think, to really sort of sink in fully is the idea that we're already whole. Because I've spent a lot of my life dealing with early life trauma and feeling fragmented and all of that, working through trying to move toward wholeness. And even in the past, until I recently redid my website, I was using the phrase midwifing wholeness through
Hmm.
soul story and song. And now I'm talking more about the sense of the whole making sacred, and looking at the sacred
Hmm.
in that way, that both from a Jungian lens and a process lens, there's this whole making sacred within us, within all of life, that's leading us in that direction. Um there's a part in your book where because I guess my question is what's difficult is the movement toward an more deeper experience of wholeness more about just coming alive to what already is, and opening, like getting new eyes to see what already is. And like you in the book, you say there's no need to achieve wholeness. It's all that exists. You are held by wholeness in every moment of your life. And then later you say your personal wholeness is found in your attunement to the present. So I guess say a little bit more about uh, the struggle of the fragmentation versus the awareness of the wholeness that we're already a part of.
So you can't step out of wholeness. where would you go?
Where would you go?
Right? So in that regard, you are whole. So in that regard, you can't achieve wholeness. It's
Mm.
already there. Then
Mm-hmm.
what do? The issue, once you understand that framework, the issue is how to surrender to wholeness. What are you holding on to that maybe saved your life, 40 years ago in childhood, and maybe now you can surrender it. And this surrender, what you're surrendering to is, as I understand it, is your being.
Mm-hmm.
And, just to clarify, my being is not what is held within my skin. My being is what I feel when I'm fully present. There's no part of the world around me that is not part of my being at the moment. And in the surrender to being, I mean, just to bring as much simple clarity to it as I can, there are qualities to being. Being is fluid. And I think Whitehead knew this. Everything is in motion. Everything is a process.
Right.
There's nothing that is static. And you are fluid. And you are 70% water. And can you surrender to your own fluidity? And what we do, you know, um, there's a sense for me in which every moment is perfect. And, if I feel it's imperfect, then either I resist it or I go to fix it or correct it. And being present isn't for me a passive state. It is a state of, the more present I am, the more activated I am.
Mm.
It's through being present that I am activated by the present. And so, to surrender to your fluidity, to soften those micro patterns of tension in the body, is to come more fully into your being. So being is fluid. Being is spacious. You look inside a solid object with the eye of a physicist, 99.9% empty space. You
Right.
are mostly empty space, and that is pure potential. And yet we feel our bodies congested and tightened and contracted. And can you surrender to that reality of your own spaciousness? You don't need to achieve it. It's there. Can you surrender to it?
Mm-hmm.
Can you surrender to your groundedness? Like everything on earth is held by this mother, and you are too. And you've been at rest on the earth since the day you were born. And when was the last time you truly felt at rest on the earth? We've lost that. And
Right.
again, to surrender to that is to surrender to the reality of your being.
Yeah.
And everything has a center, and you have a center, and your center has been displaced. We've tried to situate it in the head.
Yep.
And you will feel your center in the body if you can undo the cultural barriers that have been seeded into your tissues by our culture and come back to your center. It's there. It's waiting for you. And everything attunes to everything. Everything. There's nothing that doesn't feel the influence of everything else.
Yeah.
As do you. As does your body. Can you surrender to it? So yes, you are whole, and yes, there are these ways in which we've been desensitized to it, but the goal is never to achieve wholeness. And I think it's impossible. I mean, I'm never going to wake up one morning and say, finally, I'm whole. Now, what's next on the agenda? No, it's a continuous process of surrender, 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 and here I am.
Mm. Wow. That's beautiful. Well, let's pause here in part and to end part one here, and then we'll pick up in part two. I definitely want to dig more into this idea of feeling the world and perception, and throw a little Whitehead in and see where we can come to with that dialogue.
Love it.
All right. Thanks for listening to the first half of this episode. If you'd like to go deeper, click on the link in the show notes to access the full episode. for paid subscribers of The Sacred Everywhere on Substack. And if you enjoyed this conversation, please like, subscribe, and share this episode far and wide. I'd love your help to grow this channel. Until next time, may you notice the sacred everywhere.